Welcome to Uncommon Folk, the podcast where the lesser-known heroes, villains, and fascinating figures from the annals of history come to life. Together, once a month, we'll uncover the untold stories and hidden legends that have shaped our world, revealing drama, intrigue, and more behind some truly extraordinary lives. Join me as we explore and celebrate the uncommon folk who deserve their place in the spotlight. I'm your host and resident amateur historian Regan, and our subject for this first ever episode is a man whose name may not ring any bells for the vast majority of you. Today we're talking about Sir John Fastolf, a knight who lived through war, scandal, and the shifting sands of medieval power. We'll explore the thrilling chapters of the life of Fastolf, including his military exploits during the 100 Years' War, his rise to wealth and power, the controversies that cast a shadow across his name, and how he's connected to one of literature's most famous comedic figures, Shakespeare's Falstaff. To preface our dive into Fastolf's intriguing life, it's worthwhile taking just a moment to set the stage. It's the 15th century, and England is a nation on edge, embroiled in the 100 Years' War with France, and hosting a society still underpinned by feudal systems and the ideals of chivalry. England is a place where knights are still both warriors and symbols of honour, yet the reality of their service was often far more complicated than that. Little is known of Fastolf's earlier years. John Fastolf was born in 1378 in Norfolk, England, to a gentry family. This meant that while he was not quite a noble, he was far enough away from peasantry that it would never impact his life. His family would have been important, wealthy landowners, and considered of well-bred stock. Like many families of their status, their aim was to climb the social hierarchy, as this was a time where wealth acquired through land or war could elevate a family standing. His childhood and upbringing would have reflected the genteel refinement of the age, making him a polite, respectable young man. Perhaps you could even consider Fastolf to have been a nepo baby of his time. Fastolf's early career saw him head to Ireland, serving under Thomas of Lancaster, later the Duke of Clarence. Ireland in the 1400s was a land of opportunity for English knights, but it was also a politically volatile frontier. Native Gaelic lords resisted English control, with knights like Fastolf tasked with maintaining order, and often through force. He likely gained valuable experience in governance and military strategy while he was there. Imagine a young knight in his 20s, eager to prove himself, navigating the complex politics of a colonial island. This was a proving ground for Fastolf, and it's where he began to show his knack for leadership. His role there was emblematic of how England saw Ireland at the time. It was a testing ground for its military and administrative class. It was also a chance for younger sons of gentry families to make their mark and secure their futures. The early 1400s also saw Fastolf married to the daughter and one of the heiresses to Robert Tiptoft, the title of 3rd Baron of Tiptoft in Ireland. Her name was Millicent, and she was a wealthy 46-year-old widow who was significantly older than him. Fastolf's marriage to Millicent was a major chapter in his life, shaping both his personal and financial trajectory, as she brought considerable resources to their union. In the context of 15th century England, marriages among the gentry were often strategic and designed to consolidate power and wealth. Fastolf, as a younger son, stood to gain immensely from this marriage, and he did. The partnership elevated Fastolf's status and provided the economic foundation for many of his later ventures, as he became the holder of a number of estates. The manors of Castle and Bathampton in Wiltshire, Oxenton in Gloucestershire, and several properties across Somerset and Yorkshire brought in an income of £240 per year, a considerable sum for the time and around 5 times the amount that John was gaining from his own estates. However, their marriage also drew attention and scrutiny. Some contemporaries viewed their union as opportunistic, given Millicent's wealth and Fastolf's ambitions. This, and the fact that Millicent's former husband was Sir Stephen Scrope, Fastolf's commanding officer in Ireland, who had died in 1408. The couple had no children together, but Millicent had a son from her first marriage, also named Stephen Scrope. He unfortunately gained very little from being a stepson, and perhaps lost rather a lot, with Fastolf holding all of his mother's estates. Fastolf reportedly gave Millicent £100 a year for her own use, perhaps as a thank you for elevating his public standing. Their partnership was harmonious, and Millicent played a pivotal role in managing their estates during Fastolf's long absences at war. Her eventual death was a profound loss for John, marking the end of a fruitful, mutually beneficial relationship. If we fast forward to 1415, a now almost 40-year-old John Fastolf is serving under King Henry V, one of England's most celebrated warrior kings, and his brother, the Duke of Bedford. This brings us to the 100 Years' War, a prolonged conflict between England and France over claims to the French throne. For knights like Fastolf, it was both a chance for glory and a test of survival. Fastolf was a part of the campaign that led to the famous Battle of Agincourt, although illness is said to have kept him from the fighting at Agincourt itself. He is, however, credited with playing a crucial role in defending Harfleur, a key strategic port town. Securing it allowed England to maintain supply lines during their campaign. Following this, he would act as Bedford's master of the household and was governor of the provinces of Maine and Anjou, as well as being the warden of Bastille for around a year during the English occupation of Paris. Agincourt's aftermath elevated the English crown, but for men like Fastolf, it underscored the brutal realities of medieval warfare. Disease, attrition, and the challenges of maintaining an army in hostile territory were constant threats. The next 15 years were key in the story of our protagonist. Fastolf's name would enter the annals of history for his involvement in the 1429 Battle of the Herrings, and for a display of cunning leadership. Picture this: English forces besieged at Orleans are desperate for supplies. John steps up to the plate, leading a convoy loaded with salted fish, hence the battle's name, and other provisions. French forces ambush them, but Fastolf's strategic mind turns the ambush into a decisive victory. This was a huge deal, with the victory securing critical supplies for the survival of those forces and showcasing Fastolf's ability to think on his feet. At the time, knights were supposedly embodiments of valour and tactical genius, and Fastolf had delivered on both counts. Victories like these reinforced Fastolf's reputation as a capable and pragmatic commander. In the wider context, it highlights the logistical challenges of medieval warfare, where maintaining supplies was often as important as battlefield tactics. But every knight has their nemesis, and for Fastolf, this was Joan of Arc. In the same year, 1429, the tide turned against the English. Joan's inspired leadership had galvanised French forces, and the English were suffering crushing defeat after crushing defeat. The Battle of Patay was thought up by Fastolf and his peer, John Talbot, the first Earl of Shrewsbury, with the men wanting to confront the French and put an end to their recent successes. However, at the Battle of Patay, English forces suffered a devastating defeat. Fastolf, tasked with commanding a portion of the English army, chose to retreat rather than face annihilation, a move aimed at preserving his men, and a move viewed by some as cowardice. The chivalric code of the time meant that retreating was often equated to dishonour, as knights were expected to fight to the death rather than yield. Fastolf's peers were divided in their opinion of his decision, some seeing him as pragmatic, only leaving when resistance was hopeless, while others saw him as a coward. It was a serious defeat, with around 300 men killed and over 2,000 captured. Following this, the Duke of Bedford suspended John from the prestigious Order of the Garter. The order was the highest honour a knight could achieve in medieval England, symbolising chivalric excellence and royal favour. His suspension reflected the complex interplay between military conduct, honour and politics. Eventually, in 1442, he was reinstated to the order, a testament to his persistence and a recognition of his overall contributions. His reinstatement underscores how public opinion and royal favour could be swayed by time, context and advocacy. His return to the order reaffirmed his standing as one of England's foremost knights, although the shadow of his suspension continues to linger across historical narratives on the man. Fastolf remained in France following this defeat, and despite the Pate scandal, and continued to hold a number of military commands, including captaincies of Verneuil and Caen. In 1435, Fastolf authored a document, or report, proposing a new strategic approach to the war in France, criticising the ongoing policy of a war of sieges. He suggested instead a large-scale offensive horseback raiding strategy. This document still survives today, and is an example of military strategic thinking from a soldier in the Middle Ages. Fastolf's writings on military strategy reveal a mind that was deeply engaged with the evolving art of war. By the time John was 56, he was extraordinarily wealthy and owned vast estates, including the impressive Caister Castle in Norfolk. Caister Castle, built in 1432, was one of England's first brick-built castles, blending comforting design with exceptional fortification. The castle was a symbol of his ambition and his past success. By the age of 62, in 1440, Fastolf had made the decision to retire to his wealth and to his writings on strategy. In his retirement, he was the author of numerous reports which he fired off to the government of the day, about the strategy and policy to be pursued with regard to the war in France. In his correspondence, he advocated for military reform that prioritised discipline, logistics, and the professionalisation of armies, and argued against the reliance on poorly trained levies, emphasising the value of a well-equipped armed forces. His proposals reflected broader shifts in medieval warfare, as traditional feudal levies gave way to more modern, centralised military structures. Fastolf's insights were ahead of their time, and helped to lay the groundwork for military transformations of the late medieval and early modern periods. Some of his writings were preserved by his secretary, William Muster, and eventually published by the Reverend Joseph Stevenson in the 19th century. Throughout much of his retirement, Fastolf was devoted to managing his estates and producing documents detailing his deep thoughts on governance, strategy, and estate management. These documents reflect a man who remained intellectually active and deeply engaged with the issues of his time. They also reveal his frustrations with the crown and society, as he struggled and grappled with the challenges of maintaining his legacy in a period of political and social upheaval. In his writings, Fastolf sought to influence future generations, leaving behind a blueprint for leadership that combined pragmatism and a commitment to order. Fastolf also sat at the centre of an important literary circle, which produced manuscripts in both French and English for him. The start of the 1450s were a watershed moment in English history, and certainly so for Fastolf. The Jack Cade Rebellion had begun, fueled by widespread discontent with corruption, high taxes, and mismanagement of the war in France. Fastolf, as a prominent landowner and former military leader, became a target of the rebels' anger. They accused him of enriching himself at the expense of the common people and for contributing to England's failures abroad. Fastolf's reaction was one of indignation and defensive manoeuvring. He vehemently denied the accusations and sought to protect his estates and reputation. The rebellion showcased the deep divides in English society, where figures like Fastolf, who had been a loyal servant of the crown, were scapegoated for broader systemic issues. In 1459, at the age of 81, John Fastolf passed away at Caister Castle, presumably of natural causes. He was buried next to his wife, Millicent, in an aisle at St Benet's Abbey, which was built entirely at his own expense, as he was a generous benefactor of the Abbey Church. His death marked the beginning of a bitter dispute over his estate. During the last decade of his life, Fastolf became a close friend and political ally of John Paston, who would later become famed through the Paston Letters, a collection of over 1,000 items of correspondence between members of the Paston family. And our friend Fastolf made a deathbed testament naming Paston as his executor and heir, which led to many years of litigation. The ownership of Caister caused many legal disputes and even a brief siege by a rival claimant, John de Mowbray, the 4th Duke of Norfolk, before it eventually passed to the Paston family. These disputes were chronicled in the famous Paston Letters, providing us with a treasure trove of medieval correspondence offering unique insight into 15th century life. Much of Fastolf's fortune passed to Magdalen College at the University of Oxford, where today there is still a Fastolf Society in memoriam of the man. Despite his controversies, Fastolf's impact on military logistics and discipline was significant. He was a forward thinker, emphasising preparation and supply lines, lessons that resonate in military strategy even today. His life invites comparison to figures like John Talbot, the Earl of Shrewsbury, another prominent commander in the 100 Years' War. While Talbot's death in battle immortalised him as a hero, Fastolf's strategic retreat earned him a less glamorous reputation. Fastolf's lack of a dramatic end, no glorious death in battle, no tragic downfall, has likely contributed to his story being somewhat obscured. He lived a long life, died wealthy, and was remembered primarily through the writings of others, like the Paston Letters, and centuries later, when Shakespeare borrowed his name for Sir John Falstaff, the bumbling, cowardly knight in Henry IV and the Merry Wives of Windsor. Scholars believe Shakespeare's Falstaff was a composite character, that is, based on more than one individual, but the association with cowardice has stuck to Fastolf ever since. When William Shakespeare was penning his plays, he drew heavily on chronicles and popular stories of the time. Among these sources was one Sir John Fastolf. Originally, Shakespeare had used the name Oldcastle for the bumbling comedic knight in Henry IV, but due to protests from the descendants of the historical John Oldcastle, he renamed the character Falstaff. Some scholars believe the choice of name was inspired by our friend Fastolf. However, Shakespeare's character is a stark departure from the historical figure. Falstaff is portrayed as a cowardly, gluttonous and self-serving man, and offers a source of comic relief in the plays. But in contrast, Fastolf, while occasionally controversial, was a disciplined and strategic military leader. There's a possibility that Shakespeare, or those at the time, associated Fastolf's Patay retreat with cowardice and used this as a springboard for satire, and Fastolf's life, full of contradictions and public debates on his reputation, made him ripe for this treatment. It shows how historical figures can be reshaped by cultural memory, turning a capable commander into a comical stereotype. This has had a long-lasting impact on how Fastolf is remembered, and for centuries his name has primarily been associated with Will's character, obscuring his genuine historical significance. Sir John Fastolf's story is a tapestry of triumph and controversy, a reflection of the complexities of medieval life. His story shows ambition, service and resilience. From his early days in Ireland to his victories and defeats in France, and from his strategic innovations to the retirement that roused the rebels, Fastolf embodied the complexities of the medieval knight. His story challenges the simplistic notions of chivalry and heroism, offering instead a nuanced portrait of a man that was navigating the turbulent waters of his time. His legacy, though overshadowed by the fictional Falstaff, deserves to be remembered for its real contributions to military strategy, estate management, and the broader history of 15th century England. Fastolf's life is a reminder that history is often a bit more intricate and at times fascinating than some of the stories and myths we create. If today's episode piqued your interest, I encourage you to explore more about the Paston Letters and visit Caister Castle if you ever find yourself in Norfolk. If you do, make sure that you let us know. Thank you for tuning in to Uncommon Folk. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with other history enthusiasts. We'll see you next time, where we'll be delving into the Roman slayer, Joan of Bulgaria.